this presentation today is the tip of the iceberg, and it can go quickly, or I've got about 20-ish some slides and about a minute per slide, and I've already taken some time here, but I want to open this up for questions, and that's really the real. Let's see if we can get going on the right way. There we go. That's really the trick here, and I have. Getting into the Web3 level of things, I do have an IPFS link for the file presentation today, the PDF documentation. If you happen to have IPFS loaded on your phone, or could grab that QR, the smaller one, you'll be able to download the doc. But I also have the slides are quite are sitting in our Oracle block storage. And if you wanted to follow along or just jump ahead or whatever, you can download them right to your phone and scroll along the PDF. So I'm going to be talking about the origin story as I've seen it in my experience, and I've been in this since literally the beginning, all the way back before Satoshi, if you will, from this perspective. And we'll kind of get into that a little bit from what that really means. I'll talk about what I think are the fundamentals, and I think they are generally accepted fundamentals, the definitions and dangers, and this is lightweight. Again, this is a primer. There's a lot of probably a wide range of experience that we're talking to with the folks here. Some may have their non-custodial wallets and buy crypto every day, and some may have never heard of what I meant by IPFS, which is interplanetary file system. So we'll stop. We're going to pause briefly after definitions, and if anybody wants to throw some zingers or questions in right there, we can do that there, and then I'll continue on. Because really the gist of this is it's really not, Web3 is not about crypto. That's what I would like to level set on. I get into what I call collectives and trusts, utility and beyond. That's where I think some of the practicality comes in, and then we'll end up with Q&A. Get going on the slides in the right direction. There we go. So the origin story, and why is this important? Because I think understanding both the blockchain, Bitcoin, even the 08 Occupy movement, understanding these facets within Web3 is extraordinarily important. In particular, understanding how they relate to government could be very important, particularly in both from a treasury and tax perspective, but more importantly, what it means for citizens. And so that's really what this trail that I've been on has to do with. And of course, we go all the way back to the World Wide Web, and there's two elements in here Tim Berners-Lee has been part of, and you'll see from the '89, in the inception of the World Wide Web. I've just put some large touch points here, but to Amazon, what I would call the Web 2 beginnings, Facebook, the social beginnings, and then 2006, which was an interesting time because my background also goes into what I call the semantic web, and I'm sure some of the government folks have heard of this, ontological and taxonomy level, sort of drilling down into data and how do I ontologize the world in some sense. And Tim Berners-Lee came up with that. And the first time that I had been talking about Web3, it was all about semantic web, and that was literally way back when in 2006. But come 2007, 2008, we started getting into social media and that social platforms. And of course, the iPhone came out. And I think that's important because we're going to be talking about what identity is. But the movement and part of this really came out of that Occupy and the big crash of '08. And then, of course, by January 3rd, 2009, Satoshi released Bitcoin to the world. And this crazy time technically started. And from that 09 to 2010, and we are approaching, by the way, I think it's Sunday is the 22nd, if I'm not wrong, Bitcoin Pizza Day. And if you're not familiar with Bitcoin Pizza Day, it was the day that somebody bought a pizza for, and I don't like to look at the number because I was actually in the space at that time, but it was for a lot of money, several hundreds of thousands of dollars now in today's realm. But we've entitled that, the communities have said that's Bitcoin Pizza Day because it really, in some sense, I turned away from Bitcoin at that moment, thinking like, wow, what is this? This is craziness, and how do you generate something from nothing? But again, this is not on. We're not talking Bitcoin. I heard I'd love to be part of the other discussions on what blockchain is, but this is really about Web3. And so and we'll get into this separation of what it is not, what Web3 is not, at least in from a practicality perspective. But by 2012, investors started to take notice, and what they were starting to notice was, number one, this tokenization, or the crypto level thing started to get real in a sense, and that's coming from the hedge funds and other folks that I'd worked with. I'd done a lot of advisory work for banks and hedge funds, et cetera. And they started noticing and saying, okay, what is this? And this is where the sort of the whales and other people came out of the woodwork at that time. Anybody that got in around this time has been doing pretty well. But Gavin Wood, one of the inventors of Ethereum, in 2014 really put out, I think there's even some typos in what he put out, but it's still out there, and I have it in my references. What is Web3 and why we need it? I won't spend time talking about that here, because we're going to, again, you can go back and research, as they say in the Web3 world, do your research and read what he said and where that got to and what Tim Berners-Lee was thinking with semantic web. But by 2018, some form or fashion of what we're talking about was underway. And what that really means is we're getting into this identity space, and it's not just tokenization. And so Sandy Carter, the founder of Unstoppable Domains, former IBM AWS executive, and I have one of the links in the resources here for her interview at CNBC. I think she has a great take on this. Now I'll expand into it, but she talks about 5 fundamentals of what Web3 is, and I think it's relatively indisputable. I think it's fairly solid the way she has defined it, and I like that. So one is blockchain. The other, and that's core. Blockchain is going to be core for everything. So just put that aside, assume it's always there. Immutable ledgers, great. What's that mean? There's a lot of them, and we'll get into a teensy bit of that. Decentralization, obviously, we kind of, there's maybe a few definitions of that, but basically no central authority. Digital identity is another one she mentions, and I think that, the key here for today is we're really going to be focusing on these bottom 3: digital identity, ownership, and community. And in the opening of the discussions, hearing about NFT and tokenization, I almost promised myself not to say NFT today, but here it goes. I usually refer to it as tokenization, but not from a fiat or monetization perspective, but from an ownership perspective, and then focus on community, because I think if I were to have one talk and I had 5 minutes to explain Web3, it's going to be about community. And we'll get into a little bit of that. But I'll get into some of the definitions here. I'm not going to belabor this. If you're not familiar with this, this is the reason why I have this out here, just as a primer. And so everything is decentralized. We've already kind of level set on that. And we have autonomous organizations, applications, finance, and exchange are the key elements within Web3 as a base. And right now, an autonomous organization, as my compatriot here, Tom Plunkett, would chime in where I'd stop talking. The DAO, from that perspective, is an LLC, and right now I believe it's Tennessee, Vermont, and Montana. We could form a DAO if we so chose, and it would be covered as an LLC, limited liability corporation. And those are the only 3 states that really you'd want to be doing those things in, and you'd also want to have a good lawyer if you're going to form a DAO. Distributed application, that is across the board crazy right now. We're not going to focus a lot on that, but in the sense of what is my distributed application, what can I do with it, I will talk a little bit about that. But imagine we're going to get into hyperlocal. That's really where I talk about distributed applications. Decentralized finance, we all kind of know what that is right now. It's just no central authority, no bank. Again, maybe that gets into the government regulation side. And then distributed exchanges. And this can be a little bit of a sticky wicket. And as we get into the danger zone, we'll see a little bit of what DEX is. DEX, transparent bridge, etc. Again, this is the primer. We could have entire sessions just on those elements. And why do I say that? Because look at the exchanges. There's 19,507. Now, this came from coinmarketcap.com as of last night. I grabbed it. 19,507 cryptos and 527 exchanges. It would take a long time to kind of go into that, but I've highlighted it here, at least from my perspective. Doge, Bitcoin, and ERC20 are the things that I've, at least in my realm, have come across. There's many, many more. And that is the fungible side of tokenization. And then, oh, excuse me, there we go. And then we have the non-fungible side, ERC, Ethereum request for comment, 721 and 1155. And this is not a technical discussion of what smart contracts are. That's more to the blockchain side. But in this sense, these are ownership elements, right? And we get back to that, how do you own? What is your, how do we track these, what I have, what is my value? And in that sense of a smart contract, it's all automated. Continuing with the definitions, I call this the Web3 organics. The currency exchange, again, we talk about the exchanges, the DEXs, the automated portion of that, Pancake, SushiSwap, Uniswap, non-custodial, and I'll talk about that in a few seconds. And custodial, centralized, PayPal, Coinbase, Binance. These are just high-level examples, but there's the gist. And again, Binance has a wallet, and so I drew a dotted line between those two elements there. Why? Because it's nothing in here. This is the point to that dotted line. Nothing in here is cut and dry. And we go back to my safe harbor statement. It's a free range work in progress. So all of this is kind of, if you imagine if I animated this, it's kind of morphing around, and you've got the Web3 sort of morphic cloud that changes as things start to develop. But one of the key elements I wanted to talk about, this 15 minutes in here, is this custodial, non-custodial wallet. This is where the practicality kind of either level sets or breaks down. And custodial wallet, very simple in the sense of that's very, if we think in the world today, I sign in to my bank account, or I sign into, in this case, let's go to Coinbase. I want to buy some crypto, or maybe actually make it easier. I didn't sign up for Coinbase yet. I'm in PayPal. I'm going to go buy some crypto. PayPal owns that wallet. That's a custodial wallet. Whereas the wallet I can lose, and my address that you could send it to, and if you typo it, it goes into nowhere and burns that coin or crypto, is my non-custodial wallet. And there's a variety. And I won't talk. I'm not talking about all the technicals here. We can go into any time. I can come down to DC and talk talk ad nauseum about this framework and things that are happening. But it's important to understand that really right now we're divided into these two levels of world, and the non-custodial wallet takes quite a bit of knowledge to maintain sanity, especially if you're dealing with large sums of money. If anybody's ever transferred, even in Bitcoin, you kind of wonder if things are happening, or if you just lost everything on that non-custodial side. At the same time, I think that there is a place for particularly non-custodial wallets. And again, we talk about iPhone and socialization, and even Musk's take on Twitter. I believe that is potentially a Web3 play, if it's nothing else. But there's a lot there that gets into identity, right? And so how do I manage my identity across the board? What does that really mean? And who gets to control my identity? And I think just that the bifurcation of non-custodial wallet and custodial wallet can define some of that. And then we get into bridging. So there's that one side of this financial derivatives play on that currency exchange. And then there's the interchange of value, which is really what I'm focusing on in most of my time in Web3, which is interchain bridging and or transparent bridging and or you name it. How do you, or even through an API that has somewhat of a custodial or custodial mixed non-custodial flavor, like a few of the chains or APIs out there that go across chain. So what is, when I talk about interchange value, each one of these things is singular and unique. And then how do I get value from, say, Solana to Celo, Ethereum onto the Hyperledger, particularly from a corporate perspective, Hyperledger in some customization onto Ethereum that I want to NFT. These are all things that are dynamic and in process now, and there's any number of companies and entities right now that are working on those types of solutions out there. And it gets complex. And I think, let's see here. Yeah, there we go. So from here, there's danger. And I have, typically I'll be explaining some things out of my iPad and I'll sketch out the danger zone. And I didn't draw it on this, but essentially any given facet here could end in a black hole. And this, and I'm not sure if anybody has seen this, but I think it's Molly White is the attribution here. She's Web3 is going great. And these, this is part of the being dynamic. This is just the last week in the crypto space in the headlines that she has posted. And why is that important? Well, there's a lot of grifters. There's a lot of that, what do you call the black holes of, hey, where'd my crypto go? Or the exploits. So what we've been, this hype, here's the hype. Web3 is going to solve all our problems. We'll have decentralization and I'll be able to control my identity. Well, there's a little bit of work we're going to need to do to make it that far, but I believe we are on the right path. Sandy Carter, those folks, she's coming from a trusted corporate background. All of the people that are seeing this vision, that are seeing past what is both the detractors and the hype, I think are creating a foundation that's fairly solid. And so I'm not going to go into each one of these issues here that I've pasted, but again, find her website, take a look, do your research, and you'll be able to see, it's not all roses. And I also wanted to make sure that I pointed this out to say this, I'm not talking about that hype level here. So I'm going to pause for questions. If there are questions right now, I'll give it a few seconds. If anybody has questions to this point.
Hey, Ted, the first hand up is Gerard Daché.
Hey, Ted, thanks very much. Love the presentation so far. I want to just let you know about, can you go back to your history slide for a second? I just want to give you some input that you might want to put in there. In 1991, the first blockchain was put into production by Scott Internet.
Yes.
And so And
I was debating fitting that circle in. So that's great that you brought it up. Yes.
Well, let me tell you why I think it's relevant, because Scott's going to be here next Friday.
Oh. So I love history. So this is kind of like a happy pizza day. It's great.
Yes,
it's fantastic.
Don't skip over the fact that cipher block chaining actually has its roots back in the 70s. It goes back even further than the 90s. So this has been around for a very, very long time, just kind of growing in form and usage.
Yeah.
And we had 30 minutes. And so I could spend hours on that topic, particularly the zero proof level discussion. So that's fantastic. We'll have to.
I know you had to be careful time wise, but the reason why I say that is because if anybody would like to meet him, he's going to be at the Inventors and Pioneers reception. You can get to it on the GVA website. You go under events. But the other person who's going to be here next week is one of the co-founders of Ethereum and the founder of Cardano, which is Charles Hoskinson. His token's worth about $80 billion. So he'll be here next week at the event. So I just want to let you know that those two sort of historical figures would be at the
Had I known that, they would be on the slide. So that's fantastic. That's actually very exciting. And so to the point, I think that again, there's some foundational people in this realm. It's not, and I guess I could have opened up. This goes way back, all the way out to Bletchley Park, even like of how do we, what is this in both the crypto space, and how do we take what we're really trying to do to change the world or solve big and hard problems in this space. And this is just again, glancing the surface, tip of the iceberg here. So I appreciate that commentary.
No worries. If anybody's interested in meeting either of those two gentlemen, I just put a link in the chat. They can go ahead and hit that.
So any other questions? I can't see the participant list, so I can't see the hand.
I don't see any other hands
Okay.
raised, and we would prefer hands raised. So why don't you continue on, Ted? Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I just figured I'd stop there because this is, I would like to avoid controversy and in the sense of the practicality perspective of this. And I have, I think, maybe 10 more minutes to go here. So the personal web, I called the personal web in many projects that I've been doing since my SEMweb days, because that was Tim Berners-Lee's personal web. So if you look back at maybe some of the trail I've left on the internet, I talk about the personal web a lot. And after Pizza Day, I kind of looked away and did not look back until relatively recently. And in fact, when I came in and joined back with Oracle, it kind of became real for me, thinking that, okay, what is really happening here? I looked into the technology. I've messed with the technology. I've implemented the technology from a blockchain perspective. But really what I've been after was identity. Why? Because of the identity piece allows us to start taking control. And this is where I have a wallet in this picture, but imagine our phones become the wallet. Now I'm not sure if, about Cello as example, mobile-based blockchain and crypto and tokenization. As we move this into this hyper-local level, and I get into the utility aspects of Web3 a little bit, we start seeing like how these things can apply practically now. We understand blockchain technology and how those things work, but how it applies to a citizen, or even how it applies to car rental while you're at one of the large box stores, and you don't want to have to rent the truck, drive it home, and drive it back. How can I call a truck rental immediately, but not pay that middle tier, that extra fee? How does it go directly to the people? And then we get into, when I talk about hyperlocal and really where Web3 is going, it's really about that. It gets higher level here in the ethos, but how do we change the world? How do I help sub-Saharan Africa and education and get people water and better health and actual value for what they're doing and what their work is? So that's what this really is talking about. And again, this could be a session unto itself, just how this is playing out, and all the different actors, and both bad and good, are in this space. But hyperlocal, community, utility, and ownership, those are the key elements that if I stopped right here, that is what I would call Web3, and the locus of control resides with the individual. And that's, you hear that over and over again. But I'll back up to Doc Cyril, and Doc probably wouldn't remember me today, but back in the day, I used to annoy him probably quite a lot with emails and things, asking him stuff about identity, and I was very pleased to see he did the forward for the self-sovereign identity, and I don't necessarily like self-sovereign; it has strange connotations, but just really owning and being in control of my value. And his forward in the book, the self-sovereign identity, it's not about administrative systems; it's about you and me and how we selectively disclose personal information to others on a need-to-know basis, and being able to do that at scale. So, and I'll extend that to what is value? It's how do I get value for what I believe at scale? And so now that's why I say, what is value? And this starts to get a little heady here, but a lot of Web3, or not a lot of Web3, I think the majority of what Web3, and even the going back to the Bitcoin origin, is about ethos. And I've just listed two here. This, again, disclaimer, does not constitute endorsement. I just like these two from it's fairly clear what they're all about. Cello's about, they have it based on what they call sacred economics, if you will, but really just think of microloans and helping the disadvantaged across the board. And it's tied to tokenization, it's tied to a coin, and that value coin. I did miss one thing on my going back to the definitions, is there's this thing out there right now, at least in the hedge and banking or the level community, where we're calling this the bifurcation, where we're removing tokenization, putting in value. And so the bifurcation really means I've split from calling a token just currency, but now I'm going to apply value to it. And as example, and how do I do governance across these chains? So Celo is a proof of stake chain, and GoChain, as well as proof of stake, it's also a proof of reputation. So I just mentioned those because there's, again, this is very fluid and things are developing dynamically. But I think that level of what is tokenization, how do I gain value, is something that really is the foundation for Web3. And then I actually drew this picture. So I didn't want to copy it from anywhere because Oracle Legal does have issues when we put things in our slides that may have some attribution. But I do reference Metcalfe's law because it's really about the collective. If it's just me doing all this with my crypto wallet and I say value, well, it doesn't go very far. It really needs the entire collective all at once to really gain value. And how and why these collective forms is really about what that value and what that purpose is driving towards. So they're usually built around a common goal. You know, the Constitution DAO, SailGP, which is part of the Larry's larger group of companies. They formed a DAO to buy sports companies, right? So what are these collectives? The interplay between the collectives, I think, is going to be maybe a little bit future looking, but where, and again, we get back to DEX, bridge, transparent bridging. What's that value? How do I transpose value onto singular chains? But once these problems are solved, we're going to see a larger ecosystem, an ontological view, if you will, emerge, so that my taxonomy of likes and dislikes and things get applied within one of these communal realms, and the collective is built around that common goal, and it's all tied together with value. And the real key is ethos and trust are foundational.
If someone is typing, could they put their microphone on mute, please?
It's not me typing.
Yeah, thanks, Ted.
Yeah, and we're almost done. We're at 20 or so minutes here. Hyperlocal value, fully distributed. When I talk about the utility web, there's another side of things that is not necessarily crypto. It might get into crypto, but I think if we start looking towards and this is quote unquote the literal edge, IoT, business to business, and those types of things, we're going to find these interesting places. IPFS being one. And again, I loaded my slides to IPFS today. It's really simple. You can damage yourself if you've got documents you don't want to hit the distributed world and you suddenly load them up there because it happens fast. And that file goes everywhere. You can burn it, but you just, now we're into the trust thing again. Did it really burn? Did somebody still have access to it? Right. But decentralized Web3 and computational actors, the Flow network, or Flux network. These folks are running distributed. It's, I'll sum it up from a technical perspective. It's basically Docker images that get distributed across the world in a large consortium of small little, ultimately down to Raspberry Pi computers. And I think, one of the most interesting things, and when I talk to the chain founders, et cetera, I ask about, what's the tech on the back end? Can I run number one? Can I run on any cloud? Because I don't want to be locked in. And then number two, can it run on Raspberry Pi? And I ask these questions because I'm looking at what it means to be hyperlocal for the future. And this isn't necessarily happening now, but in these two situations, and I'm sure there's many, many more that I don't know about, right now, these two right here, IPFS and Flux.io, you could go in and see the utility, decentralized, not necessarily crypto perspective running now. Now, Flux has that crypto level. IPFS is Filecoin if you look at it, but it's really about that distributed level technologies and who's working on what and how they apply. And again, don't constitute any endorsement here, but I think these are very interesting, extraordinarily easy things to spin up and get running, and maybe dangerous in that same sense. There's some things we need to be aware of when we do launch these things, like who's in control. I'm trying to switch slides here. Let's go forward. There we go. Because we're in transition. and I realize we're coming up on time here. Web 2 to Web 3. I think one of the key elements of Web 3, from the perspective of where we are today and what we can do, is actually going to drive back into Web 2 and trust. Both the non-custodial, custodial wallets can happen in both places. So I can have my identity, and over time, I can gain more and more control over my identity. But I may want to trust an entity like PayPal to buy my crypto, just as an example. But I also don't want to have some nefarious organization by me gaining my file coin by hosting, my 10 or 15 Raspberry Pis in my house here. I don't want some bad actors to be placing stolen crypto or bad files or something on that device that is actually illegal. How do I tell? I can't. It's all encrypted. I don't know what it is. I'm offering up services, but I don't have any control over it. So I think that one of the key things that will happen in the future will be that the trust becomes actually a more important part. Whether that's centralized or decentralized, how that's controlled, it's going to be driven by ethos. And like I said, example, Cello, they're all about change the world and be nice to people. How do they keep the bad actors out? Well, even in their regular Discord channels, there are constant people coming in looking as if they're admins who are not. So we're in the early stages of this, but I believe that this Web 2 to Web 3 place is part of the practical sense, what we can do. We've seen blockchain implementations from a corporate perspective and how they work, from a Hyperledger perspective, and that having to have trust to get into the Hyperledger, all the way out to I could implement Cello in my own space and then have a free range chain that is zero trust. And then how do I really regulate that, or what are the controls? How do I let people in? Pinata is an example of IPFS in that realm. Anybody can go in there, but really, what's the value? And not controlling anything. I want to have, from my perspective, a vision on where this is going, and from a corporate perspective and a government perspective, even more so, a way of having a start of authority, that certificate of authority. And we can even get into citizen identity now with that. So my ID can tie back into this, and I want to have that trusted level in the background. And so as I end, I had to just kind of throw a little bit of metaverse in here. Won't talk a lot about metaverse, but I think that metaverse has been part of the hype. And there's me standing in Decentraland, and then a buddy, some friends, and again, no endorsement. I know the folks creating Planet Mojo, and that's all about green and sort of like little Groot level characters running around in some play space. What does that mean? Well, you get to decide. I think that really where I'm going with metaverse, and the one thing that I think is really important is the extended reality. Because now if I want to tokenize something, or I want to digitize something, and I have this as an example, I actually am working on this project. If I want to tokenize a digital legacy for somebody, and I want to create a space that goes into the future and extends where they are today, and then really bring what I call their Genesis block with them, how do I do that now? I think that there's levels that we can do that within this Web3 space that combine everything that we've just heard about all the way up to this point, from both the NFT space to like literally a metaverse to actual physical reality. I've walked into the museum, I've got my NFTs in my pocket, and then do I want to display them on the wall for the others that are around me to see, that kind of thing? That's all part of what that extended reality experience. So I just wanted to throw that in at a last little bit to talk about metaverse, or at least mention it here. And in summary, and call me out if I missed a piece, but I believe Web3 is about hyperlocal personal value. That applies from the government all the way down to private, local industry, and then even into our houses and what we like, dislike, and the ontology of me in some sense. It's really about people over technology. That's the one thing I probably hadn't even said really clearly up until this point, but it's not about the tech. The tech is table stakes. I can implement any number of tech, any number of white papers saying that their way is better than my way, or that whatever. That doesn't matter right now. It's really going to be about that collective and that ethos form collectives, and what drives this, the basis for the collective. Again, Sale GP, we're going to buy some soccer teams or something, or Constitution DAO. I tried to get a copy of the Constitution. That maybe goes into the black hole level of things. But the locus of control, I always want to say locutus, if you're a Star Trek fan, locus of control from business to individual. I think that will be the shift gradual over time. Participation is always going to be equals value in this case, no matter what. And here's the trick: trust is still critical. And I think Web 2 and Web 3 will coexist for the foreseeable future. But Web 3 in reality is happening now. And you get to decide how that actually applies. And I think I'm almost right on time.
You're brilliant on that. Stephen Hawk has had his hand raised in the chat, followed by Emmanuel. So Stephen first, and then Emmanuel, you will be next. Over.
Hi, thank you for a fascinating talk. And yeah, just regarding this locus of control, is it safe to say it's sort of similar to move from a democracy, or I should say, more of a dictatorship to a democracy of sorts, and libertarian sense where the individual has control, and then how that relates from a government perspective of where they would need to maintain control of some sense, and maybe your take on that for the future.
Yeah, and there's an edge to all of this, right? There's a company out of Canada. I always like to mention them because they have been working with the Canadian government, but Liquid Avatar, and they were early on, and the founder David Lukash there has some great vision into that space. But the locus of control, I think, can be from a libertarian. That's why I don't like self-sovereign identity, because it gets so far out there into that libertarian, it's all about me space. And that gets balanced out by that ethos in those collectives. So yes, we're going to have bad actors. We're going to have these entities that try to maintain or try to usurp or try to influence control no matter what, even if we have a fully autonomous, decentralized, self-sovereign identity, and I am me, and I get all the value that comes with that. I believe that governments and corporations, and that gets back into that GO chain, reputation-based chains. Reputation is the link. Reputation is the bridge, is the warranty. I think that is the buffer between the full libertarian free-for-all that could be Web3, that we hear in the hype is Web3. I think most people wouldn't like that. And again, it gets, some of the comments you could make in this realm get political, and I will stay away from that realm. But I believe that citizens, particularly, and that's why I mentioned Liquid Avatar in Canada. I think Europe and Canada are a little bit ahead of the U.S. on this. And that's not from a technical perspective. It's from a people policy perspective, at least in my readings of the people and policy, and where their ethos already is. Now, I grew up in England. Didn't say that in my history, so I have this affinity for some of the things in the tech coming out of Waterloo in Canada, and out of particularly Ireland and such, particularly with semantic web, and how that applies to the individual. So I don't know if that helps answer or frame out, but I think that it could go in a bad place. But I believe that the trust ethos and really folks not knowing what the heck's going on and really wanting, the government's back, or have the government to have their back ultimately against bad actors. I think that is where self-sovereign identity doesn't take it to the extremes, if that helps. I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. Fascinating.
Emmanuel, please come off mute.
Hey everyone, this is really great. I just wonder, so is there actually a practical application for Web3? Like I see on games stuff, but is there actually actual in business, like for e-commerce, for example, Amazon, how can they operate in blockchain or Web3? The second question is, in terms of a government, how would a government's role would be working? So let's say they want to move into the Web3, if everybody moved, and what would it look like? How would they operate? Thank you.
Yeah, great questions. And the things that are coming to mind, and again, bear with me as I try to remove some of the hype. I think it's going to come down again to identity, to wallet. What is the practicality of anything that we're saying? Can I go buy land in Decentraland? Well, I could have when it was cheap, maybe. What does that mean? Do I want to be spending my time spinning around, or do I want to go out on a hike and see when I buy that land in the virtual land? Did the trees get planted in the national park that I get to go see now? So how does that work? How does that, again, we get into transfer of value. What is the value? From a government perspective, I think there's one really easy and quick way to do this. And again, I'm talking as an industry person now. I think Microsoft has tried and they've done great things in this space. And full disclosure, Oracle is a great partner with Microsoft. But Microsoft has been in the identity space for a while, in this decentralized identity space. And why am I saying that? Well, I think from a government perspective, and we could even get into voting, and again, I try to keep the pain of the current world out of here. But if I could say, I have my identity, I'm going to sign my ledger, and that's my vote, that would be one great way to actualize Web3 in a very practical sense, and also make it so that we enable democracy, right? From a perspective today, how would I do it? I just had to add we get into custodial and non-custodial wallets. Right now, unfortunately, from an enablement perspective, unless I sign in, so here's where Web2 comes in, I sign in to my website. Now, my website is that bridge to the other chains, and I trust the website. Let's use Oracle as an example. I sign into my Oracle account. Oracle now gets me into my Microsoft account as an example, right? Or gets me into my state authorized account for my HHS and other level benefits. So how, that handoff, that can be done custodially, or if it was done a more puristic Web3 way, my wallet, I open up MetaMask. As I go into the website, it's never great to prompt when you log in. That becomes annoying. But if I log into the website, I have a button up the top, usually in the right, that says, do you want to sign or sign in with your wallet? And then when you click that button, it opens up and you've validated yourself in some form or fashion. Again, we're still early on. I'm not saying it's perfect, but in some form or fashion, I validate that I am me, and that literal hash address that's in that wallet is me, and now I sign in. When I was in my Decentraland, in that picture back here, I used my wallet to sign in. So I'd already done what I'm saying. So it'd be very easy, and it's about 15 lines of code. I didn't even talk about composability, but 15, 16 lines of code to get these things enabled. And I can enable it with my Google ID, as example, and then have a MetaMask or any other level wallet. Wallet tech's easy. It's all JavaScript now. Just plug that in, sign in, and now I have a Web3 level website up and running, if that helps. It's not just about buying land in Decentraland. I can now do that for, say, checking out at B&H, or logging in, as I said, to, say, even Ohio's data portal. As an example, I could have a wallet thing, and it takes just a few seconds to enable that. What does that really mean ultimately? It's a free range trial right now. We don't have those answers.
Thank you.
All right, I don't see any other hands up, but Gerard, you had a statement, a challenge statement in a way that might be nice to look at. And let me just see the time. We're at 10:53, so it would have to be a really quick 2 minutes, very quick ask and response. And then I'd like to then pivot over to Jason. Over. Gerard, did you want to ask that?
Yeah. No, we got too many screens open, so finding the browser with the link on it. The comment that I made was, the intersection of government and reputation can be dangerous. I'm a big fan of reputation, but when government starts using reputation, it can sort of weaponize it. So I just mentioned, what China does with its.
I'm very familiar. Yes.
Reputation score, and and then if you look at, and what's fascinating to me, is how both the U.S. and Russia are talking about this idea of sort of controlling the news, right? Controlling, what is truth, what is not truth, and I think it's a very, very dangerous place to get into. So I just throw that out there as a conversation. Not that I have an answer. I just think it's something we have to be very careful about.
I'll say I agree, and I'll end it there, because that is part of what I say, is that those boundaries, and none of this is, again, this could go to the dark side. And I have talks and other things I've given about what I call the gravity and value system, where gravity is based on that ethos, and then that foundation genesis block needs to be formed out of what is good ethos and sort of the rights of people, if you will. And so I'll leave it at that. But yes, that's a really important. The bad actor piece is key right now, and as you go back, you'll see it's happening continually, particularly China and reputation score. So I'm all in on that.
I just say one other thing about that, real quick before I turn it back over to you, Sandy. For that reason, when we started GVA, literally the very first thing we wrote, and it's the most important thing on our website, is our ethics statement. And I dropped a link. It's on our about page. But I would encourage everyone to go to the about page, read the ethics statement, because we recognize this was going to be. We have members in Russia and Iran and China and U.S. and the UK, and so we've got
Gerard,
to find a way.
we got to move on. Jorge,
Over.
please end the recording, so that we can.